Now it's our great pleasure to welcome to the studio Pippa Heylings, Member of Parliament, UK House of Commons.
Yeah.
Great to have you with us, Pippa.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, super. Very nice to you, Pippa. So Pippa, we're just wrapping up the show now, and maybe this is something that we can, in a sense, look forward to, that you're going to be informing us about and informing the audience. You're working on a climate and nature bill, is that correct? And what is this about, and what does it stand to achieve?
Well, really it's about bringing hope. So in the UK, there was groundbreaking progress with the Climate Change Act that we've heard about in 2008. And that's been used as an example all around the world. What we now need to do is recognise that as we haven't moved fast enough on reducing, our carbon emissions, climate change is now the greatest threat to nature, to wildlife at land and at sea. And at the same time, when that's getting destroyed, we're losing the carbon sink, the natural ability to help us to fight climate change, as well as adapt to the climate shocks that we can't avoid, which is like flooding, heat waves and storms, coastal erosion, sea level rise. Nature provides us natural defences to that. So what we have to do with a Climate and Nature Act is make sure that our government responds to both at the same time, both the need to reduce our carbon emissions and to recover nature.
Right, because in a sense they're both at risk at the same time.
Absolutely.
But they're mutually reinforcing in terms of opportunities for solutions. So you're kind of fighting with one hand behind your back if you just take the climate angle and forget about the nature one, and the hands both come out with the act, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you find is people just see these as naturally things that should be happening together. It's common sense.
Yeah.
Yet we've got conventions, the UN conventions.
Yeah.
One is on nature and biodiversity, one is on climate change. Finally, they've admitted and recognized that we've got to work on these both together. And so what we need to do at home is to be able to bring those together.
Yeah. So I think it's good, because it was always recognized in the Paris Agreement that there's no way you could achieve net zero without restoring nature, making sure and looking after nature you have and restoring the nature you've lost, because it is both a technological challenge, is cutting the emissions, but also a nature story as well, because nature, absorbs the emissions. So the whole Paris Agreement is about restoring the balance of our planet to what it was before the Industrial Revolution, in a post-industrial setting, as it were. And so it's, how are you going to pilot this act through the House of Commons?
So it's coming through a private members bill. So we've got the Liberal Democrats, so we have an MP, Ros Savage, who is putting this forward. Backbenchers get the chance to, through a ballot, to put a piece of legislation.
Yep.
So this is coming in January. What it means is there has to be more than 120 MPs in the room who will support this legislation. It's on a Friday, when normally MPs are back in their constituencies, representing and working with local people. So it's asking them to go back to Parliament, be in the room to get the second reading of this piece of legislation through.
Right.
And if we get it through, that means that then we would be able in April to have a much deeper piece of work on this primary legislation.
Right.
And what it means is, really, people already are concerned about nature. They're backing this in their hordes. So we've got local councils backing it, we've got cross-party support, young people. So they're all saying, I want my MP to be there. I want you to go back to Parliament, make sure that this gets past its second reading.
And how will you, if it does go through and it does succeed, and perhaps even if it didn't succeed, you're putting down a marker, right, in the UK on this. What about the rest of the world? Could they be inspired by this? Could be something that you could then bring, the UK government could bring back to a COP in the future, and start floating this idea as a more general concept?
So like I was saying, the Climate Change Act in 2008 was groundbreaking, and many countries followed that.
Yeah.
I think this could bring the hope we need right now, because nature is in crisis as well at the same time. And many of the efforts now to move forward and accelerate on carbon emissions technology could actually impact nature. So we've got to make sure that we do this thinking at both at the same time.
Right.
So we've got to keep the Amazon forest as the lungs of the planet. And at the moment, the Brazilian part looks as if it's tipping over into being an emitter rather than a sponge that soaks up that carbon, which tips us into all sorts of catastrophic scenarios.
Right.
So across the world, we could have climate and nature acts that are looking at both of these together. But I have to say, I having worked in many countries, and many of them have got more biodiverse countries and landscapes than we have. They've looked after their nature far better than we have in our country. So we're actually learning from them. But perhaps this legislative approach is one thing that we could share.
Yes. So, sorry, no, you carry on.
So Pippa, I watched you watch from the stands here before you entered, and I'm curious because you radiate optimism, and which we really need. And the last question the former panel got was about, do you really think we will be able to meet the 2030 goals and the 2050 goals? So I'm a bit curious in relation to this, the work you're doing. What are your thoughts on what is your answer to this?
So I work a lot with young people as well, and they have climate anxiety. And that's because they're just really worried about their futures much more than other generations are. And the main reason they're worried is that they don't feel that people are listening to them, decision makers, and that they're not making the right decisions. So it's agency. So basically, I'm full of an optimism that we're bringing young people in, we're bringing local groups, local councils in. That's the way we broke the impasse before Paris. This is the way we're going to break it now, through a Climate and Nature Act, which empowers and motivates everyone again.
Absolutely, yeah. Getting people back into the game at all levels is really important, and then they can also put pressure on their governments, because in the end the governments are voted in by the people, and whether it be communities, whether it be cities, whether it be the private sector, they all give the governments a license to operate, right? And the governments then know that these groups have their back as well, the government's back to go out and make some tough decisions. I just get the feeling right now we're living in a kind of post-Second World War world where everyone thinks that everything has to be stuck in aspic, right, and preserved, and there aren't any tough decisions to make anymore, you know? There are tough choices to be made, and those choices are about the future of our children, right? And we have to be courageous about that.
So I just think we've gone through big change in our country with a change of government. We've never had so many brand new MPs all at once in one general election. And that in part was a rejection of what had been happening with the previous government, but I do know that was also in favour of a different future. So some have called that almost a climate election. There were many, many people who were voting tactically, one for how we get that change in government, but also, is this the best person to represent me to stop the rowing back? There'd been a breaking of the political consensus around climate change in our country. And polling showed people weren't in favour of that. So we can get that change. We can't have things in aspic, and we just need to take people's hearts and minds with us. I mean,
the previous government did something so stupid, which was to make the price of the latest round of wind projects in the North Sea, which has been a huge success in the UK, so cheap was the price that nobody could afford. No wind farm.
How many offers did we get?
Zero. And now in the latest round, we've even got ones that are going tethered wind turbines that can go much further at sea.
But Nick, what it means is that we've lost time. So we have to go even faster and further now because we've gone backwards. So I'm optimistic, but it means absolutely we've got to do everything, bring everybody with us and do as much as we can. But we can't only go for energy solution. So this is what we would say to the Labour government as well. We've got to make sure this is across all sectors. And we've got to bring nature on board.
That's right. It's the whole economy. The whole economy. Pippa, thanks so much. We run out of time, but lovely to see you, and really best of luck with this private members bill, and hope it succeeds. And we'll certainly, if you keep in contact with us, we'll certainly be help to promote it a little bit through WeDontHaveTime.
Well, that would be fantastic.
And we're happy to lend our social media power to it, and let's see what we can do.
Thank you. There's so many campaign groups, 0 Hour, others behind us on this, so amplifying that voice will be fantastic.
Super. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much.